Good morning, truth and transparency, lovers, haters. Good morning. Some of us, good afternoon. West Coast, really, really good morning. What is up, guys? The People versus O.J. Simpson. I created my thumbnail for the episodes that I will be doing on this. So hopefully you guys got a chance to see that thumbnail. The person that's standing next to Nicole is his son. So if you guys are looking at the thumbnail. Oh, there we go. Good morning, Lana and chat and mods. Been looking forward to this live. Had a great time last night, but I can only stay for about 20 minutes. Got to go somewhere. I hate that I'll miss it. It is okay. It'll stay up there for you. But thanks, Johnson, there. Again, welcome other new people. Here we go. We're just going to jump right into it. Let's talk some true crime.
It's week 3 of the O.J. Simpson trial, and the prosecution finishes telling the story of domestic violence suffered by Nicole Brown at the hands of O.J. Simpson. Next comes the timeline, as jurors learn about the last hours of Nicole and Ron Goldman and how a dog figured into the discovery of their bodies. I'm Roger Cossack, and this is O.J. 25.
All right, back on the record in the Simpson matter.
The people called Denise Brown.
Be reminded you're still under oath.
So she was called back to the stand.
All right, good morning, Ms. Brown. All right, you pull the microphone close to you, please.
Ms. Brown, when we left off last Friday, you told us about an incident that occurred after you and your sister Nicole and Ed McCabe returned to the defendant's house after an evening at the La Cantina.
Yes, I did. He wanted her out of his house, and he continued going up the stairs, and he grabbed the clothes out of her closet and started throwing them down onto the foyer where we were, down on the bottom, and came back down, grabbed Nicole. He threw her up against the wall, and the only thing I remember is that he looked so, his whole facial structure changed. Everything about him changed.
When you say his facial structure changed, what do you mean?
It was a calm, quiet, normal conversation, like we were sitting here right now. And then all of a sudden, it turned into the eyes got real angry. It was his whole jaw, everything started, his whole face just changed completely when he got upset. It wasn't as if it was OJ anymore.
Did you try and stop her from returning to the house?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I told her that she shouldn't go back. She says, I'm not going back. I'm just going to go pick up a few things.
Did she say if she'd return back to the hotel?
Yes, she did.
She said she was going to come back to you?
Yes, she did.
Did she come back?
No, she didn't.
Victims of domestic violence love their partner, and they stay because they hope that maybe one day the person that they first met will present himself again.
A valuable aspect of the O.J. Simpson trial was the fact that people were talking about domestic violence. And you generally didn't hear about it in neighborhoods like Beverly Hills or Brentwood or Bel Air. And that's where these people were from. It forced everyone to address the fact that this issue isn't just based on socioeconomics. It's not based on race. It happens everywhere.
What did the defendant say about your sister's weight while she was pregnant?
I used to call her a fat pig. He used to comment like this all the time.
Can he make hand gestures?
Yes.
Domestic violence is very insidious. It just doesn't hit you. It creeps up and it builds up. We need to start taking that seriously, the emotional, psychological assault. Because until we do that, Nicole's will continue to happen.
Have you seen these photographs before?
Yes, I have.
You told us a moment ago that you took these photographs, is that correct?
Yes, I did.
Would you describe for us, please, the circumstances that led to your taking these photographs?
Nicole asked me to take them for her.
When was the first time you saw this photograph?
I saw this in her bathroom drawer.
Was this a bathroom drawer located in the house at Rockingham?
Yes, it was. It was in her bathroom.
I saw that in her bathroom drawer one day, and I pulled it out and I said, oh my God. I said, Nicole, I said, what happened? And she says, oh my God. She goes, isn't that great? She goes, the studio painted a black eye on me. And I said, what? She goes, didn't they do a great job? And I said, yeah. I said, God, they did a great job. And I threw the picture right back in the drawer, thinking nothing of it. And when I read her notes and diaries, I was like, oh my gosh.
You know, Your Honor, I have been
Thank you, Susan. That's awesome.
practicing for a long time, and I've never seen anything quite this extraordinary where a photograph that is clearly inadmissible is just thrown up on giant screen television for the jury to see.
These photographs were shown to the court. They were shown to the defense a month ago.
The problem I have is that we've shown the jury this photograph without a foundation as to where and when this photograph was taken or by whom. And we don't know if it ties up to any of the incidents that I've indicated are admissible. It may be irrelevant. And if it's irrelevant, the inflammatory nature of that particular photograph, which you have to admit is a pretty strong photograph.
They didn't object to it. They've known about it for a month. They saw it last week, and they didn't object to it. But now they object to it today after the jury sees it?
Well, now we found out there's no foundation.
There is a foundation for it.
For the prosecutor to come to court and flash a photograph without knowing what that witness was going to say about the photograph and telling Your Honor that we haven't asked her. I guess she's going to say they were 1985. I don't know what she'll say. I have to ask her. Is something that is not permitted by our rules of procedure.
You can look at the photographs and clearly discern that she is younger than People's 9 for identification. If they wanted to object to the introduction of these photographs, they could have.
They are.
Okay, yeah, after they've been shown to the jury.
Their presentation on these issues told Your Honor these photographs were 1989. I don't think there's anything more to say.
Whoa!
I am not going to allow the use of that photograph, despite the fact that you've already seen it. I know it's difficult to unring a bell, but I'm going to ask you to disregard what you saw in that particular photograph.
Yeah, I don't think a jury can ever unring the bell. I think that's one of the fictions of law, to put out of your mind everything that you've seen.
The reason for that is there is no foundation. We don't know the date, time, and place where that was taken, by whom, and what it purports to depict.
I remember seeing that picture several times, and it was a brutal picture. She was beaten badly. And it's not something that you forget, and it's not something the jury would forget.
People have seen this one photo of Nicole with all these bruises and, all this stuff. And if you notice, they never admitted that into the trial because Nicole had made the movie about the battered wife. And most of that is movie makeup.
All we have is the picture, and we can't tell the place, date, and time, and who was there, who took it at this point. So I'm going to ask you to disregard that photograph, and we'll continue with the testimony of Denise Brown.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Did you say something?
Shapiro.
Prior to going back to Rockingham, you said you had been at some type of restaurant
Right.
and there was some drinking going on?
Yes.
And you have told us that you had some problems with alcohol in the past.
Yes.
At that time, were you also still drinking?
Oh, I was drinking at that time, yes.
Do you recall what your state of sobriety was that night?
I had had a few drinks.
Could you tell us how much you had to drink, if you recall?
Oh, I don't recall how many drinks, no.
And how would you...
I would like to interrupt and just say that my future wifey is in Jat. Me in Boston. We are officially engaged. We have fish rings, and she doesn't know it, but I am surprising her in Boston with some carrots. You know, like the kind that Bugs Bunny eats, those type of carrots. So, I love you, Boston. I'm so glad that you're deciding not to pay our bills this month and joining us on this live. It's 11:11 on my ticker here. Make a wish. Carrying on.
Describe your consumption of alcohol.
I said I had a problem.
That week, the New York Times describes Denise Brown as a compelling witness who was pale and tearful and gave a chilling account. The Los Angeles Sentinel, a newspaper that largely serves the African American community and covers the trial from the defense team's perspective, calls Denise Brown a drunk in their headline.
I believe what the reporter from the Sentinel was saying. I believe it was his objective opinion. But he also comes with a life's realization of the way the black community is treated and the way news is or is not reported on what goes on in the black community.
Central to the prosecution's case is the timeline. It begins with what happened earlier in the day of the murders.
Okay, so this is where Lana takes over with the deep dive. I'm all about timelines. Okay, so this part of it is important, for me, if you want to see how my brain works. So here we go, timelines, everything.
On that day, was a recital held for your niece, Sydney?
Yes, it was.
And when he greeted you and your sister Dominique and your parents, what was his demeanor?
He had a very far away look. It was actually really kind of spooky. It was a frightening look.
So did you turn around and look at him during the time that he was sitting behind you?
Yeah, I talked to him.
Did he appear happy and cheerful?
No, not at all.
Mrs. Garvey, when you walked into the recital auditorium, did you see the defendant?
I did.
Did you notice anything unusual about him at that time?
Yes, I did.
And what was that?
It was just, he was not the same as I had ever seen him before.
And how was he different? How is it that he was not the same?
I immediately noticed that it was a vast departure from the norm of how I've ever seen him before. He just seemed a little vacant, non-responsive. When he stared at me, I felt like he was looking right through me, and it scared me a little bit.
Nicole Brown and O.J. Simpson have a complicated relationship. They've been divorced for 2 years. They've dated other people. They have gone back and forth about getting back together. As they head to the recital, they are not together, except to see their daughter perform at a local middle school.
Every time I turned around, he was staring at Nicole.
You're welcome.
When defense attorney Robert Shapiro cross-examines Denise Brown, he sets a trap.
Mr. Shapiro, I understand that you have a videotape that you want the court to view.
The court's
This is insane.
video of Mr. O.J. Simpson at the Paul Revere.
This was insane, in my opinion. in a good way for obviously the defense. Okay. So they were able to look at this Paul Revere Middle School because somebody recorded it. Obviously you got parents recording stuff just like we do today. And look at that. 7 p.m. is the music concert. So 7 p.m. we know 100% is when it started. Then you have this.
School just leaving the recital, and ask if you can identify the people who are depicted in the tape that are relevant to this case. Would you please do that for us?
Sure.
Thank you. Now, there's somebody who is wearing looks like a blue shirt with dark hair facing a gentleman who is O.J. Simpson. Do you know who that person is?
That's me.
And what were you just doing at that time?
I gave him a kiss goodbye.
And right to your right is a gentleman. Who is that?
That's my father.
And right to your left is another person.
That's my mother.
In this instance, the defense team is brilliantly confronting Denise Brown with something you could think of as a little bit of proof for their point. So she testified already that she saw O.J. Simpson with a spooky look on his face, a frightening look. He seemed far away to her, and the defense wants to contradict that. So they're taking this piece of evidence from the outside, bringing it before the jury, and letting them see the proof in the picture. To see the look on his face that doesn't look like someone who has a spooky look, a frightening look. He appears cheerful and happy, and he's seen picking up his child and kissing Denise Brown at one point. He's smiling right there.
I was at the dance recital that he was at that day because our daughters were in the same dance school. And as with the year before, I saw O.J. Simpson at the dance recital that day, and people would say, Juice, how you doing? O.J., hey, how are you? People loved him. They wanted his autograph. They wanted to take a picture with him. They wanted to shake his hand. They loved him.
Have you ever seen a video of Mr. Simpson shortly after this recital interacting with the Brown family and with his son, Justin?
I did.
And when you saw him at the end of that video there, he seemed to you to be kind and happy. Did he not?
Yes, he did.
Like he always does. Isn't that right?
That's right.
And when you saw this up in the DA's office on Friday, didn't you think, gee, that O.J. Simpson looked pretty kind and happy at that point? Didn't you think that?
Well, what I really thought was that was an amazing change.
Is that what you thought?
I really did.
Now, do you see that's the exact same date? You understand?
I know, that's right. It amazes me.
Then the prosecution had a chance to do redirect examination and what we call rehabilitation in the courtroom, where they had a chance to have her clarify that when she said O.J. Simpson looked frightening and spooky, it was inside of the dance recital. This video was taken outside.
You just saw the defendant's demeanor in the videotape outside the recital, is that correct?
Right.
Is that the way he appeared inside the recital? That is his demeanor?
No.
It was different inside?
Yes.
So then why would you approach him and be all lovey-dovey with him if he was acting a certain way inside? You know, it's just one of those things that everybody always felt like that, hey, the camera, everyone's watching, so, you know. Where's Nicole? Nicole wasn't in any of those clips, though.
He told the jury that they'd have evidence that he was ugly, in an ugly mood, and brooding. But look at the videotape. I think everybody has to pay attention. The videotape does not lie. I mean, it reminds me of Rodney King. I mean, you see certain things, and it's pretty graphic. And people can describe all they want. But when they're faced with what actually happened, I think it makes it pretty clear for these jurors.
And where were you planning to go?
We were going to Mezzaluna restaurant.
All right, so they want to tell us at 6:45. Is when they were leaving. But now what doesn't come up is, well, we'll let her testify first.
He was a charming guy, so he had lots of women in his life, but he was dating somebody at the time. He was not in an affair with Nicole.
You know, there you go. There's a piece that I never knew, is that Ron Goldman had a girlfriend at the time. Did not know that. After upon seeing this, I thought that was interesting.
You know, he was a 25-year-old kid just trying to find his way in the world, you know, like the rest of us were at that age.
Now, on the night of June the 12th, did you happen to see Ron Goldman?
Yes.
Was he working there also?
Yes, he was.
Nicole and her family came in for dinner after Sydney's recital.
So we were trying to decide who would take the table, what stations we'd work. And at that point, Ron saw the name and said, "Oh, it's Nicole Brown. It's a friend of mine."
Do you recall what she was wearing?
Yes, a black dress, short black dress with a black blazer over it.
Do you recall what time Nicole and her party left?
Between 8:30 and 9, 8:45-ish.
We got up and we walked out, and Nicole was gonna go get some ice cream with the kids, and we kissed each other goodbye. The last thing I told her was that I loved her.
Okay, after Nicole and her party left, did you...
Okay, something that I want to point out is that this woman testified that that Ron Goldman saw the name in the book, meaning that there was like a reservation. It's like they're claiming here in their testimony that there was a reservation, and at the Brown, it said Nicole Brown.
happened to see Ron Goldman?
Yes, I did.
Shortly after that, did you get a phone call?
Yes, I did.
Remember what time approximately that you got that phone call?
It's about 9:30, 9:35. It was Mrs. Brown.
Nicole's mother?
Yes.
And did she ask you to do something?
She did.
And what was that?
She asked me to look for a pair of glasses she had lost at the restaurant.
And did you find the glasses?
Yes, I did.
Where did you find them?
I found them in the street by the gutter.
And what did you do with them?
I brought them back in, and I spoke to Mrs. Brown and told her I'd found them. I put them in an envelope.
Ms. Crawford, showing you what has been marked as People's 32. Do you recognize the handwriting on the front of this envelope?
Yeah, that's my handwriting.
And it says prescription glasses, Nicole Simpson. We'll pick up Monday?
Yes.
About how long after the first...
Nicole's mom said that we will pick them up on Monday. That was the plan. The plan was to pick them up on Monday. The plan was never for Ron Goldman to take these glasses to Nicole. It's very important. I think that everybody should note that, because I think that that was something that was talked about a lot, was that, you know, she asked him to bring those glasses to her. That's not the testimony at all. Right, here you go.
First phone call, did you get the second phone call?
About 5 minutes.
Would you estimate then about 9:45?
Yes.
Did you recognize the person who called you?
Yes, I did.
Who was that?
It was Nicole. She asked if she could speak to Ron.
Do you recognize what we're showing you here?
Yes.
What is it?
It's Ron's shirt and pants. Yeah.
So then the testimony is, well, did you get another phone call? And now here Nicole calls and asks to talk to Ron, which nobody knows what was said on that phone call because they're both dead. Okay. But this woman, the plan was with the mom was that they were going to get picked up on Monday. 5 minutes later, then Nicole calls. Okay.
After he hung up the phone, did Ron say something to you?
Yeah, he told me he was going to drop the glasses off at Nicole's.
So did you give him the envelope with the glasses?
Yes.
Did you see him leave the restaurant at some point?
Yes, I did.
Do you recall about what time it was?
He left at about 10 minutes to 10. I saw him walk out the door.
And was that the last time you saw him?
Yes.
He went to help someone out, return those glasses, and lost his life trying to help.
The state's timeline was that O.J. Simpson was last seen around 9:40 or something when he returned from going to McDonald's with Cato Kalin. They then put the time of the murders at about 10:15. That's when neighbors heard Nicole's dog barking and wailing and crying. And so they believe that's when the murders happened.
On June the 12th of 1994, sir, in the evening, where were you?
At 10 o'clock that evening, I was watching the news in the master bedroom on the 3rd floor with my wife. 15 or 20 minutes into it, I heard a very distinctive barking coming from somewhere to the south of where I live. And I was aware of it for maybe 5, 6, 7 minutes. And at that point, I stopped watching the news and I left the master bedroom.
Was there something unusual about that dog barking that drew your attention to it?
It was it was fairly persistent. It was at a significant pitch. And as you may recall, I described it at the time as a plaintive wail. It sounded like a very unhappy animal.
No objections to that? He's not a professional.
My question is, you recall so indicating to the police that at about 10:15 to 10:30, witnesses, you and your wife, heard a dog barking uncontrollably to the rear of their residence. So indicate that to the police?
No, sir. As I told you, I told them that I heard the dog barking between 10:15 and 10:20.
So that they have that wrong, they're wrong. Is that right?
That is possible because I did not say that.
That dog would have marked when the actual crime was committed because the dog somehow heard or was able to sense the violence that was taking place.
As you looked at the dog and you examined it for a tag, did you happen to notice its paws or its legs?
First thing I noticed, it was above the paw, it was slightly on the leg. There was a streak of blood or a drip of blood on one of the back paws. And that was unusual to me, so I observed more closely and then saw that there was also blood on the bottom of the paws. As I walked the dog towards Bundy, along Montana, the dog pulled back. The dog shied away from going towards Bundy. It kept pulling back towards my apartment complex.
So what did you do?
So we walked the dog back to the courtyard of my building, and I went upstairs to get some water for the dog.
Did someone that you knew from your apartment building appear in the courtyard?
Yes, at that point, Shukru Bostepi, my downstairs neighbor, entered from the back entrance to my apartment complex.
You had a conversation with Stephen, right?
Correct.
And he told you where he'd found the dog?
Correct.
So did you decide to take the dog back to that location?
Yes.
And what was that location you decided to take the dog back to?
Bundy and Dorothy.
Can you tell us what you saw?
I saw a lady laying down, full of blood. I could see the person was a lady.
Should be noted that midnight is when they lead the dog back to the bodies. Not like 10:30, not like 10:45, midnight. Midnight.
She was blonde. I could see her arm. That's about it.
And that was about it?
I turned to my wife and said that there was a dead person there. And we tried to call 911. We decided to call 911.
And what did you do to try and call 911?
We crossed the street, ran to a house, knocked the door.
My door chimes started to ring, or rang, according to my recollection, a few minutes after midnight, a few minutes after 12.
Had that ever happened before?
No.
Did that scare you?
Yes, definitely.
Did you answer your door?
Pardon?
Did you answer? I'm sorry.
No, I did not answer my door. Not a few minutes after midnight. We wouldn't go to a door that time of night.
So what did you do?
I called 911.
My apologies for having kept you waiting so long this morning. There were some very delicate matters that I had to inquire into this morning that took a significant period of time, and I appreciate your indulgence in this matter. It became necessary for me to excuse one of the jurors in this case, and we will now at this time.
Okay, so there was no like 911 call that would be like, we just saw the body, but oh my God, we have a woman here, there's blood. Like, so nobody went. So there was no 911 call right after seeing the body or bodies. So how 911 was called was because this woman did not answer her door, and instead she called 911 to say someone's ringing my doorbell. Again, I believe in details. Details matter.
I asked Mrs. Robertson to draw the name of an alternate juror to replace that juror.
Juror number 1489. This was significant because this third juror to be dismissed was...
This was the third juror to be dismissed within 3 weeks. Just insanity.
Was a 63-year-old white woman, and she was replaced by one of the alternates, naturally. The alternate who replaced her was a 54-year-old African-American man. So this made the number of African-American jury members be 9 at this point. And in a case like this, where there's so much attention and such a high level of scrutiny being paid to the case, folks were honing in on the jury makeup just as they were honing in on the evidence being presented in court. So there were essentially 2 narratives going on. There's a narrative inside the courtroom being played out through the introduction of evidence, and then there's also the bigger conversation about race that surrounded this case in the media.
The following program contains graphic images and language. Viewer discretion is advised.
Okay, so one of my favorite parts about this documentary is one of the jurors kept a journal, and he is featured, and you're going to start seeing him, a black man. He's one of my favorite contributors in this documentary, and he kept a journal, of every day that he was there. Talk about just like smart man.
It's week 3 of the People versus O.J. Simpson, and we hear from the first officer to discover the bodies of Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman.
3 weeks
He
in.
tells the jury that he saw a trail of blood drops leaving the murder scene and bloody footprints as O.J. 25 continues.
It's Robert Risky, R-O-B-E-R-T-R-I-S-K-E.
Good morning, officer.
Good morning. My partner and I crossed the street, went to the walkway, and we observed a female white in a black dress laying in a puddle of blood on the walkway. We approached the body of the female, and as we got probably 2 feet from her body, we discovered the body of a male white laying against the north fence.
My Lieutenant John Rogers called. He said, we have a double in West LA. Right away, I began to think there's not a lot of homicides in that part of town. It's a more upscale part of Los Angeles. It was on Bundy Drive, which was an upscale area.
In the first photograph to my left as I face it, upper left-hand photograph, what does that depict?
That's the sidewalk on the west side of Bundy and the foot of the walkway leading up to 875.
And does that depict the scene as you found it when you first approached?
Yes, ma'am.
And the second photograph to the right of that?
The second photograph would be the victim, the female white in a black dress, laying on the walkway.
And you can see that at the very rear of the photograph, upper part of the photograph.
That's correct.
And the third one?
The third one is the same picture of a female white in a black dress, but it's just closer.
She had no shoes on. You could see, you could see the life that had just been there. These were, 2 very young, vibrant people, and they were.
She had no shoes on. I think that's important to note. She was just basically opening up her door. She has no shoes on. So she wasn't going anywhere. Her kids are upstairs sleeping. So she has no shoes on. She basically opened up her door.
Just left like that.
What did you see in that walkway?
There's a pool of blood under the victim, the female white, and it flows down towards the sidewalk.
And in the blood, did you see any kind of patterns?
There was paw prints towards the sidewalk, and there was a heel mark by the fence.
Does this depict the woman as you found her and the scene as you found it when you first approached?
Yes.
Can you tell us where you were standing in order to see that?
To the left of the body, you can see a call box on the wall right there.
It seemed if you watched O.J. Simpson that he knew when the camera was on him, and he would become more expressive, but it was hard to tell, how much of it was play acting and how much of it was real.
Risky and his partner had a lot on their plate, being the first responders. They needed help, and they needed it there initially to secure that crime scene and search the house. And that's what he did.
Officer Risky was a really sharp young officer that instead of just doing something wrong, he would actually bare his soul that I don't know, tell me, how do you handle this? How do you do this? He was a really good officer, and he did a really good job that day.
Tell us what you saw.
I saw the envelope there, the heel print. If you look at the picture closely, there's a glove and what appears to be a knit cap under the plant on the right.
After you made these observations, sir, what did you do next?
My partner and I seen that the front door was open. There was footprint, what appeared to be bloody footprints going towards the front door. We stepped over the female victim and went to the front door. We saw the shoe prints continue on down the walkway. We looked in the house. There was appeared to be no evidence of ransacking or forced entry. Officer McGowan put up the crime scene tape. Sergeant Kuhn made sure nobody walked through the crime scene, and my partner, Officer Terrazas, went to the back, secured the rear location.
When I got there, I saw that the street was blocked off. They had the whole area cordoned off properly. There was concern for the media because it was on a busy street, Bundy.
In the course of your training, sir, at the academy, were you trained in crime scene preservation?
They kind of gloss over. They don't really train in it.
Did you learn it at some point in your duties, in your functioning?
On the job training.
All right, this is a board, Your Honor, of 15 photographs as of marked People's 45.
All right, People's 45 display with 15 photographs of alleged shoe prints.
All right, now photograph G, H, I, and J in that row. Can you tell us if you recognize what's shown there?
It's a picture of what appears to be a bloody footprint.
And do those look like the bloody shoe prints you saw that night?
Yes.
And on the bottom row as well, sir, K and L.
Two more what appear to be bloody shoe prints.
And do they appear the way you found them, as when you first came to the scene?
Yes.
Good morning.
Morning, sir.
Mr. Risky. You had been a police officer for how long on June 12th, 1994, when you responded to this location?
4 years, almost 2 months.
4 years, 2 months at that time?
Yes, sir.
You described for Ms. Clark that when you were at the Los Angeles Police Academy that they kind of glossed over this crime scene maintenance and training. Is that correct?
Right.
And much of what you learned actually on the job once you actually got in the field. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Have you had any training in the sensitivity of DNA?
No.
Had the coroner's office been called at all by the time that you left?
I have no idea.
You have no knowledge of all of that? Now, when the 4 detectives went over to Rockingham, do you know whether or not the photographer went with them?
I don't know.
Do you know why it was then that all 4 of the detectives then went over to Rockingham?
No.
One of the commanders showed up, and he said, it's apparent now looking at the inside of the house, talking to people, who the woman is. She's Nicole Brown Simpson. The commander said, okay, I want Furman and his partner to go, and I want you, Lang, and Van Adder to go. The 4 of you will go up there, contact O.J. Simpson.
Do you know why it was that Furman returned to Bundy after 6:30 and was participating?
Okay, you guys just saw there, 2.1 miles is from Bundy to the mansion, to OJ's Rockingham mansion. 2.1 miles.
And taking pictures. Do you know why that was? I want you to look at what's been marked 104 on People's 56. See the envelope here?
Yes, sir.
You see where the grouting on the envelope is across the grouting?
Yes, sir.
Here at 104. Do you see that?
Yes, sir, I do.
See the grouting here?
Yes, sir.
The envelope's on the other side of the grouting?
Yes.
Can you explain how that envelope got moved?
No.
Can't?
No.
The coroner comes along, and they had to remove the bodies. She inadvertently touched the envelope. It moved a little bit. Cochran knows that.
6. See the envelope here?
Yes, sir.
You see where the grouting on the envelope is across the grouting?
Yes, sir.
Here at 104. Do you see that?
Yes, sir, I do.
See the grouting here?
Yes, sir.
The envelope's on the other side of the grouting?
Yes.
Can you explain how that envelope got moved?
No.
Can't?
No.
The coroner comes along, and they had to remove the bodies. She inadvertently touched the envelope. It moved a little bit. Cochran knows that, but he's not stupid. We're going to get the cops every way we can because there's just too damn much evidence.
I think Tom Lane's an asshole, but that's just me.
Back then, you were allowed to meet your friends and family at the gate, and I remember seeing my dad, and he was with a family friend, and I remember just completely falling apart in my dad's arms and walking through the airport just arm in arm. It was eerily empty. Getting into the car, I remember KFI was a local radio AM station here, and the first words I heard were Ron Goldman and Nicole Brown Simpson slaughtered to death in Brentwood.
It was gut-wrenching, that Kim had to testify in a trial of the murder of her brother. It was horrible. Horrible, horrible, horrible.
I testified in the case to my brother's clothing kind of being thrown around, and so that there wasn't a lot. It looked as if it was a quick wardrobe change.
Kimberly Goldman, Kimberly Goldman.
Ms. Clark.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Goldman, are you the sister of Ron Goldman?
Yes, I am.
Did you visit his apartment on Gorham shortly after June the 12th?
Yes, I did.
I was overwhelmed with anxiety and fear, and then feeling excited that I got to be part of it because I thought it was going to be important, that I was testifying to something, and this is going to be something important that the jury needs to hear. And I look back and now I'm like, I don't think it was all that important, but at that moment, I felt like I was doing something.
Did you recover some clothing that you brought to court today?
Yes, I did.
And I'm showing you the bag in which we have previously marked as People's 30, the white shirt and the black pants.
Yes, that's
Recognize
correct.
those?
Yes, I do.
Can you tell us where you found them?
They were draped over his bedroom door, the shirt and the pants.
Just draped over?
Obviously he'd taken them off and just swung them over the door.
Not on hangers?
No. My father and I put them on the hangers.
I was nervous to sit across from the killer. I was nervous to sit on the stand. I was nervous to look at the jury, even though I'd been looking at them. I now had a different angle, and now you suddenly think they're looking at you, they're judging you, you answer the question and be very thoughtful about your answers and don't put too much out there, and then it's just too much. Nobody prepares you for that.
Did you see any other white dress shirt or black pants like that in the apartment? Only those?
Only those.
All right. Ms. Goldman, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Accused.
I only know what happened that night based on the evidence that was presented during the trial. I don't know any other information. Nicole's mom left her glasses behind, and my brother offered to drop them off on his way out that night. There was testimony that there was voices yelling, "Hey, hey, hey," which I believe was my brother, kind of coming up into what I believe was the killer physically pushing or assaulting Nicole, and my brother wanted to stop it. And if you follow the evidence again, Nicole was pushed back and she has a contusion on the back of her head, and I believe that the killer attacked my brother first and then went back and finished killing Nicole because my brother's blood was found on Nicole. If Nicole was killed first, you would have found Nicole's blood on my brother.
I can't. Every time.
I think that's really interesting what she says. So I'm going to replay that for you guys about who was killed first, who was killed second type of thing.
Nicole was pushed back and she has a contusion on the back of her head, and I believe that the killer attacked my brother first and then went back and finished killing Nicole because my brother's blood was found on Nicole. If Nicole was killed first, you would have found Nicole's blood on my brother.
I can't. Every time I think about it, I try not to think about it because the images are too much.
Ron Goldman was the classic case of wrong place, wrong time. It was just horrible. And
I have thoughts to that, though, as far as like blood being on one person, blood not being on another person. Where Nicole's body was, the killer had to go over that body and be around that body to leave. But yeah, I do believe that Ron did come up and walk in on a confrontation. I don't know if it was in the act yet of, any violence per se, but in the act of a confrontation.
Kim, his sister, I don't believe has ever gotten over it.
It's a really hard place to live because my brother doing anything other than what he did that night would have been uncharacteristic of him. As I have shared many times, my brother was my protector growing up. He was fiercely loyal, never wanted anybody to be wronged in any way. And so stumbling into a scene where he's witnessing an acquaintance, a friend, being attacked, like, how could I not feel proud of him for trying to stop it? I wish in those selfish moments of my sleep that he would have turned away and run for his life, but it just would have not been him. And so I choose to embrace that, and in my mind, he's a hero.
He was Kim's brother and best friend forever. Every picture that I ever took of them, they were holding hands or hugging. Not because I asked them to, that's just how they were.
I've always been super proud of my brother. I'm super proud of my dad. I'm proud of myself because I think that who we were throughout this process was exactly who we are in our private life. And I think that not unlike any other victim or survivor, you figure out a way to function within it in the most honorable way that you can, and to be able to be part of a movement that I think is so helpful and so important. I'm really proud of all of that. I feel lucky that people got to see the two most important people in my world. They raised me. I feel really honored. And I hope that what my dad and I are doing in the wake of my brother's murder does right by him, because I have a legacy and I want my son to be proud of me. And so I don't know, I guess I'll find out one day, I don't know.
Super sad.
Week 3. Week 4.
All right, before I move on, anybody want to say anything about that? Super sad though there at the end. But this timeline is very, very well, when you guys are going to hear like about the whole when OJ is getting, leaving and stuff like that to get to Chicago, which is coming up. But this timeline, I think that what took me back when I went over all of this was 12:13 a.m. 12:13 a.m. is when they arrived, and they're saying that this happened at 12 or at 10, 15. That this was the murders were at 10:15. But, OJ was last seen at McDonald's with Cato around 9:40. To then have murder happen at 10:15 after having McDonald's with Cato at 9:40. The whole thought of OJ standing outside watching to see who comes and goes from Nicole's place, then one would think that he'd have to be waiting there until when Ron then did arrive, and then would have gotten into an altercation, if he was doing something like that. But he's also trying to catch a flight. So this whole time frame of why OJ would do that then, I don't believe that this was a premeditated murder. I don't at all. I believe that this is somebody that was pissed. Somebody was upset. and Jason Simpson, who is the son of OJ, they were actually supposed to go to his restaurant that night, not Metzaluna. He became a chef, and he was supposed to be cooking for Sydney and the family after, and then she did a no-call, no-show, and instead went to Metzaluna. So the reason that the call wasn't until 12:13 is because they found the dog. They didn't know where the dog belonged. It wasn't like people were like, oh, this is Nicole Brown's dog. They were trying to find, they were trying to figure out, whose dog it was. Nobody knew at the time that it was Nicole's dog. So when they started walking, you find a dog, you want to walk around, maybe there's somebody outside looking for their dog. So it's kind of like one of those situations. And then they, came across the dog leading them to kind of the crime scene. But at first, remember, you hear them say, like, oh, we went upstairs to get the dog water. So they had the dog for a little bit. And then that also begs to tell this whole thing of this 10-15 time frame of when they actually found the dog. Or that's when they said they heard the howling. And it was based on the news. And it was it was at 10 o'clock news. And then 10 to 15 minutes into it. Well, I've always been one to know, like, about the 11 o'clock news, but that's just me. But yeah, there was a 10 o'clock news. So we're gonna let this, this next episode roll here, but yes, I believe that Jason Simpson is the killer. So I believe that and when we go through it, I'm going to point out a couple different things. Also, Jason was a chef, so Jason had the knives, and they took the knives home every night. So when you were done, you had like your belt that had all, when you worked at like a nice restaurant, you had your own, knife set. And so how are they killed? Well, with a knife. So we're going to get into all that, but here we go. Remember, Sydney, Justin, they're sleeping upstairs. That means there's a chance that Sydney and Justin could walk down and see all of this. Yes, Mod Squad. Love you, woman. Oh, God, I'm yawning. I need to wake up a little bit. I need to start doing some morning, throw some Baileys in my coffee, but here we go. I got one more of these lined up for us, and you guys, it just keeps getting better. Just keeps getting better.
A highly unusual Sunday in court in the case of the People versus O.J. Simpson. The jurors get a break from the isolation of their hotel rooms. They traveled to Nicole Brown's condo, the murder scene, the restaurant where Ron Goldman worked, and O.J.'s house on Rockingham Avenue, where he returns not as the man who lives there, but as a prisoner on trial for his life. I'm Roger Cossack, and this is OJ 25.
They're going to take a field trip.
The court's purpose in going here is to allow the jurors to see the scene as close to reality as is possible without any interpretation put on it by either party. Mr. Cochran, do you want to address that issue?
Sure. At no time has Mr. Simpson ever desired to go to or be at the Bundy scene. It's painful for him, as it is for the Brown family, and accordingly, he plans to stay in the vehicle at that location.
Mr. Simpson, this is a court proceeding that will be conducted in the field. You have the right to be present at any time when the jury is receiving evidence, and actually viewing the crime scene obviously is the receipt of evidence, since they'll be seeing locations that are relevant to this case. My understanding is that you are willing to waive and give up your right to be present at the Bundy address while the jury is conducting their view of the scene.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, thank you very much, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you the purpose of our court session here today. We are going to go out to 4 locations that are relevant to the facts and issues of this case. We will have to actually block streets to allow us and you to have a view of these locations without any interference from any outside influences.
The motorcade has left the criminal courthouse in downtown Los Angeles, headed for Brentwood. There are 14 vehicles in this entourage.
There are dozens of police officers, half a dozen helicopters, and scores of spectators. Jurors are not allowed to talk to each other, but they can take notes. The bus loaded with 12 jurors and 9 alternates stops at Ron Goldman's apartment for fewer than 2 minutes.
That one right here. That one.
The purpose? So they can see how close it is to the crime scene.
Right there in the corner where the San Vicente Street sign is.
For about 2 minutes, they stopped by Mezzaluna, the place where Ron Goldman worked.
Then another very short drive, just about 6 to 8 blocks down Bundy to Nicole Simpson's condo.
Escorted by bailiffs, the jury gets off the bus and walks along the front walkway, the side pathway, the inside of the condo, and along the back alley.
They stood in the same place where Nicole Brown Simpson's body was found and where Ronald Goldman was found. It's almost an eerie feeling, I think, to stand at the scene of death.
The O.J. Simpson entourage has made its way into Brentwood and to the Rockingham Drive estate of O.J. Simpson.
Rockingham was a beautiful place, big, sprawling.
The jury walks around outside, goes into the guest house where Cato Kalin stayed, and then inside where O.J. lived. But once they get inside, they see a home that is barely recognizable, even to O.J. Simpson.
The reaction to the actual visit to Rockingham did surprise the prosecution because, it angered the prosecution. The house did seem to be rearranged. There was a little more football memorabilia than maybe there had been previously.
The prosecution screamed that we were trying to change O.J.'s image. Well, yes, we were.
Should they have done that? Probably not. Should Judge Ito have known about it and stopped it? I would think so, and I certainly understand why the prosecution was upset. Now remember, they didn't destroy evidence that was crucial to the case. They didn't hide evidence. They just rearranged the decorations in Simpson's house. I would have argued that you're giving a false impression by changing things, but I'm not sure I would have been successful.
I think it was evident that O.J. Simpson was pleased to be home. He was home but not free. He was there with deputies around him. He was not particularly heavily guarded, but he knew that certainly there were people there who were ultimately going to take him back to prison.
So if the killer wasn't a dog, then somebody had to go out the back end, didn't they?
The following program contains graphic images. Viewer discretion is advised.
Collection of evidence is pretty straightforward. Were there mistakes made? Sure. Are there always mistakes made? Yeah, there are. But they're humans. And you have to say, is it a reasonable mistake? Does it look like there's any nefarious plot going on here to frame O.J. Simpson? And if there's not, can we dismiss or discount this mistake as just being an honest mistake? Or was it for a purpose?
All right, Sergeant Rossi, would you come over here and stand by the court reporter, please?
Mr. Nevin, got the truth to help you file?
Yes, I do.
Please have a secret witness stand and state your story, your first and last name.
What were you able to see when the flashlight was shined on the victims?
I saw a female victim lying in a pool of blood. She appeared to be wearing a black dress. On the other side of her, I saw the male victim. He appeared to be in a semi-seating, slumped type of a position. There was a lot of blood there, and in with the blood there was a lot of dog prints.
Paw prints?
Yes.
Did you see any shoe prints on that walkway?
Towards the front of the condominium, I observed some what appeared to be bloody shoe sole prints on the ground, on the concrete.
And which direction were those shoe prints going, sir?
They're going towards the rear of the condominium.
In a direction that would be from where the victims lay out towards the rear gate?
That's correct.
And you didn't see any of those until you got halfway down?
That's right.
And did Lieutenant Spangler then walk down the walkway and look at the bloody shoe prints or approach the bodies of the victims?
No, he didn't do that.
Why not?
I think he accepted the explanation from both the detectives, and
I believe this was speculated.
Sustained.
I knew what police were supposed to do at the crime scene and simply took him through the routine and exercised him a little bit for breaching protocol, to put it nicely. In other words, sloppy damn police work.
Sergeant Rossi, you said that you were familiar with certain parts of the health and safety code.
Your Honor, may I please see what counsel's reading from?
You already have at the bench.
Oh, he smashed it out of my hands.
Ms. Clark, have a seat, please.
Do you remember the question, Sergeant?
yes, sir, I do. And yes, I am familiar with some sections.
Did you, during that 45-minute period, have a legal duty to call the coroner?
Not as far as I know, no.
Did you know it was a misdemeanor to fail to call the coroner, Sergeant?
I don't believe it is, sir.
I thought that the entire crime scene had been very sloppily handled. Indeed, that was a theme throughout the case. Much of their evidence was contaminated before it ever got tested.
There's nothing screwed up about that crime scene. Is it contaminated? I challenge anybody to tell me there was a crime scene that wasn't contaminated. All crime scenes are contaminated.
Furthermore, there wasn't any question in your mind once Officer Risky had swept through the premises that the killers, whoever they were gone. True?
That's correct.
At large, on the loose, carrying with them, in all probability, some bloody evidence. True?
Objection. Counsel's testifying.
Sustained. Fact, not evidence. Rephrase the question. Killer or killer.
Are we restricted to the state's theory of one killer, erroneous though it may be?
No, but the question assumes. Hold on. The question assumes the fact that.
Sit the fuck down, Marcia. It's Marcia.
Fine, I accept that.
Thank you.
Can you tell us why it was that for the better part of an hour after you learn of a brutal homicide, you were not concerned about notifying the ex-husband?
Because those types of notifications are done by the detectives.
Oh, and until the detective comes on the scene, he stays at risk? Is that it?
Well, if that's what you want to say, yes, that's what we do.
Why in the world did you need to go on the crime scene to begin with if you're not a detective?
So I could give the responding detectives an accurate account of what was there. They require that from me.
So when you go to a crime scene, just like the officer that first arrives there, you pick a path that will be repeated by everybody else. So your job is really important, that you see what looks like evidence. So that is your absolutely number one priority, to preserve as much as you can as the suspect left it. And then you start documenting what you see there as obvious evidence.
Wasn't the evidence staring you in the face that somebody had to go out the back?
Well, like I said, it was outside, so...
I understand. Didn't you tell us in your testimony that you saw tracks on the sidewalk on Bundy?
On Bundy?
Yes.
Dog tracks. Only.
That's right.
Yes.
So if the killer wasn't a dog, then somebody had to go out the back end, didn't they?
Sir, they could have gone any direction.
Without leaving any footprints after being in all that blood, Sergeant?
Well, that's possible, yes.
And how is that possible? Please tell me.
To just leave and cover their tracks somehow.
What?
Leave and cover the tracks. Would you explain to all of us how that could be accomplished by a killer with bloody feet?
If they didn't get blood on their feet, they wouldn't leave tracks.
Having been at the scene, can you imagine that the perpetrator or perpetrators didn't get blood on their feet? Can you imagine that?
There was a lot of blood there.
No. Can you imagine that these murders were accomplished without getting any blood on the feet of the perpetrator?
I think anything is possible.
Anything is possible.
So you think they may have been fast enough on their feet to avoid blood while accomplishing the carnage that we've been looking at on screen. Is that right?
I can't accurately testify to that, I'm sorry.
Oh, all right.
And the jury's saying to itself, well, if they were sloppy in this area, how can we trust the other areas where they say they found evidence?
Detective Phillips arrived at Bundy at 2:10 and didn't depart till 10 a.m.
No, I didn't note that.
You know that's false, don't you?
No, sir, I don't know that's false.
Didn't he call you from Rockingham?
Yes, sir, he did.
You now know it's false, don't you?
Yes.
Okay.
F. Lee Bailey just wow. That was the sergeant, one of the like the second people I think on scene.
And language. Viewer discretion is advised.
Why did you, after 5 o'clock in the morning, having not lifted a finger to notify Mr. Simpson for over 4 hours, suddenly declare an emergency?
Francis Lee Bailey is born on June 10th, 1933, just outside Boston. He drops out of Harvard University to join the Marines and becomes a fighter pilot. Bailey attends Boston University Law School in 1957, where he achieves the highest grade point average in the school's history. He becomes famous as the attorney for Dr. Sam Shepard, who was accused of murdering his wife. When he joins O.J. Simpson's so-called Dream Team, Bailey is already a living legend. He's especially known for his larger-than-life courtroom presence when he cross-examines witnesses.
At the age of 21, a local trial lawyer took me under his wing and began to explain to me the facts of life. And he said, cross-examination is something you have to grow into. No one will ever teach it to you, so you watch and you fashion your own technique, and then you polish and polish and polish.
F. Lee Bailey, to all of us, I think, was like legendary. I mean, his reputation preceded him. We were excited to meet the great F. Lee Bailey. He was in many ways everything that we thought. He was larger than life.
And of course, that same entry as to Detective Furman would be wrong, wouldn't it?
Possibly. It's not my job to review the crime scene log, sir. That goes to the detectives.
I thought you did review it.
I looked at it.
But because it was not your job, you didn't look at it carefully. Is that what you're telling me?
I didn't scrutinize it, no.
It was a bad job. Nobody denied it.
People make mistakes all the time. When you have nothing else, you put the cops on
Oh,
trial.
Tom.
That's the only reason all this nonsense happened.
Oh, Tom, do your fucking job.
Dot the I on the form that they filled out. So what if they didn't cross the T? Those things suddenly meant you weren't doing your job properly. Everything was translated in a negative way by the defense. Every day was more and more and more and more BS. You throw enough of it out there and some of it's liable to stick. And it did.
The witnesses, they all seem to come out of central casting. The police officers look like they were on Hawaii Five-0, right? You know, they look like cops.
All right, records reflect that Robert Risky is still on the witness stand. Mr. Risky, you're advised that you are still under oath. And Mr. Cochran, you may resume your cross-examination.
So that we're clear, while you were there, no, the photographer never came inside and took any pictures of anything inside that place, right?
Not that I was aware of, no.
While you were there, you saw a photograph, did you not, of a detective pointing down at toward the foliage?
That's correct.
You know who that person was?
Detective Furman.
And while you were there, did you ever see anyone take or seek to preserve any shoe prints that were in that particular area, if any?
No, I didn't.
You did not see anybody do that?
No.
And based upon your training, evidence should not be moved by anyone at the crime scene, isn't that correct?
Unless it's necessary, right?
And unless it's necessary?
Right.
Can you think of any reasons why it would be necessary to move somebody's evidence?
Well, if you take photos before and you have to get the bodies out, and then you put it back and take photos again.
Isn't it important for a jury or a trier of fact to have the evidence exactly the way it was?
Sustained.
Did you see any criminalists while you were there look in the alleyway for any track marks or anything of that nature?
No.
And you're a well-trained officer?
I'd like to believe so.
Do I think that the LAPD did their job and did they messed up? Absolutely not.
Yeah, I think they made a lot of mistakes.
My job is to go out to the scene and to ensure that the scene is properly secured.
Notify the investigator after my observations and secure the scene, make sure nothing gets moved.
And any obvious evidence is protected.
Did you ever direct anyone when you were there to take any pictures in that particular area?
No, I didn't.
And I'm talking not only about the concrete, I'm talking about the dirt area.
I didn't direct anybody to take any pictures anywhere.
Did you stand guard inside the house to watch where the photographer went?
No.
To your knowledge, had any effort been made to call a coroner to the scene?
Not to my knowledge.
Is it your job to notify the coroner?
No, it's not.
Is it your job to direct the investigation?
No, it is not.
Is it your duty to watch and see what is being done by the criminalist or a photographer or coroner?
No.
Do you know if any of those people had been called before you departed?
No, sir, I don't know.
Is it your job to direct the search at a crime scene
No.
or the collection of evidence?
No.
So none of those things are supposed to be done by you.
No.
And that's proper procedure, not for it to be done by you.
That's correct.
The jury was receptive to the idea that there was a rush to judgment and there were corners cut or evidence planted.
We knew we would be, cops did this, the cops do that. If you don't think they planted evidence, maybe they're racist. If they're not that, they're just bumbling idiots. That was coming. It comes in every case, and you expect it. Again, if it doesn't, the defense would be inept. You expect all that stuff.
As I sat there listening to Ms. Clark and Mr. Shapiro, I knew that somehow this morning I would be dragged into the abyss with the rest of the lawyers in this case, Your Honor.
Chris Darden. Chris Darden, my man. Give me some Chrissy Poo.
In week 4 of the trial, the jury hears how police found their way from the crime scene.
So one would think that, okay, yeah, this is going to go back and forth. They're inept. But what they were never banking on is that there was so much press that these people were rolling film the whole time. So then all these people's film, they subpoena and get, and they use in the courtroom. And that's just what's going to start happening right here.
Scene at Nicole Brown's condo to O.J. Simpson's house on Rockingham Avenue. It's there that a bloody glove matching the one found at the crime scene is discovered on Simpson's property, as O.J. 25 continues.
It looked like a made-for-TV crime, but this was a real crime. And I think people got caught up in the story of it and the.
It's because it did go on forever.
And sometimes we're not able to realize that this was a horrific crime that affected 2 families, really 3 families, O.J.'s parents, his family, Ron Goldman's, and Nicole's.
Next witness.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you may give is to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
On how many occasions have you been requested to make personal notification to the next of kin in a homicide case?
This would be the first time. It's unusual that the commander gave me a direct order that I should do everything I could to find Mr. Simpson and notify him in person before the news media became aware of what happened out at that residence. He thought it would be very insensitive if we knew about it and did not notify him in person prior to the news media notifying him. We never considered Mr. Simpson to be a suspect at that time.
Well, when you have a combination of a former wife being killed, the husband being a potential suspect being in the vicinity, and the husband has a history of assaulting her, many people would see a sufficient combination of factors to at least point the finger of suspicion.
What time did you arrive at 360 North Rockingham?
Approximately 5:05, 5:10, as we approached the 360 North Rockingham address, I observed a white vehicle parked on the east curb facing northbound.
And what kind of vehicle was that you saw?
It was a white Ford Bronco.
And what happened next?
The 4 of us walked up to the Ashford gate. I believe that I was the first one to push the intercom buzzer to try and raise someone in the residence. Everybody was talking and pushing buzzers and going different locations, and I went back to get my cellular phone. I was going to call the watch commander.
Cellular phone, 1994, nice.
When you dialed that number, what happened?
I received a recording, answering machine recording.
At some point, did Detective Furman come and report some observation he had made to you?
Yes, he did.
Was that before or after you got the defendant's phone number?
That was before I got the phone number.
And based on what he told you, sir, did you go and observe something?
Yes.
What was that?
I observed a spot on the Bronco on the driver's door, just above the door handle, that was a brownish red small dot.
And after that conversation, sir, what happened next?
Detective Furman went over the wall of the Rockingham residence.
Was that at someone's request?
Yes.
Whose?
Van Adder or Lang, I believe it was Van Adder.
Couldn't get in. It's a 5-foot wall, about 14 inches in thick, easy to get over. Furman was closest to the wall. He jumps over the wall and opens the gate.
We could actually have another victim in there dying while we stand out here ringing a bell. So I just said, if we want in, I just went over the wall. I disarmed the hydraulic gate and I let him in.
Now, after having rung the doorbell and knocked on the door and gotten no answer, what happened next?
I walked around to the back, to the south side of the residence, to the north side of the residence, saw the pool, the back of the house, and as I walked closer, we saw what looked like little cottages or extensions of the house on the south side of the property.
And then all four of you stood at the room marked as Kalen's room?
Yes.
Then what happened?
I knocked on the door.
Did someone answer?
Eventually.
Not right away?
No.
Eventually, when someone did answer, can you describe the person that opened the door?
He was a male Caucasian with brownish blonde hair. I learned his name later to be Cato Kalen.
Cato was living at OJ's house because Nicole was going to take him in at her place. And OJ said, no, you're not living at Nicole's. So we let him live in the guest house. He was in.
Never knew this until this documentary. That, again, obviously this is his, but that Nicole was like, you can just come live with me. No, that's not going to happen.
An errand boy. That's all he was. He was an errand boy. Didn't have any money, didn't have any future.
I asked him if he knew if O.J. Simpson was home. He said he did not know, I believe.
What happened next?
Knocked on the room that had been pointed out to me as Arnell's room, and someone asked me who it was, and I said the police, and then a female answered the door.
And that female, did she identify herself?
I asked her who she was, and she told me her name was Arnell Simpson. She told me that Mr. Simpson had gone on a red-eye flight the night before and had traveled to Chicago, and that he was staying at the Chicago O'Hare Plaza Hotel.
And then?
Shortly thereafter, a male voice, which I recognize as Mr. Simpson's voice, answered the phone, and I asked him, I said, is this O.J. Simpson? And he stated, yes. Who's this? And I said, this is Detective Phillips from the Los Angeles Police Department. I have some bad news for you. He said something about, what's that? And I says, well, I've got some bad news. Your ex-wife, Nicole Simpson, has been killed.
What happened next?
I think the first words out of his mouth were something to the effect of, oh my God, Nicole is killed. Oh my God, she's dead. And then he got very upset on the telephone. And at that time he said, well, I'm going to be leaving out of Chicago on the first available flight. I'll come back to Los Angeles.
And by the way, this doesn't happen. One, you don't leave the hot crime scene. You'd send other detectives. I came to realize that the only reason they went to notify, and that's what they went up to Rockingham for, to notify O.J. Simpson that his wife was dead, before they actually have the coroner there to identify that as in fact her, was because it was O.J. Simpson. Now, in the history of law enforcement, in my experience, you don't notify ex-husbands of somebody's death in person. You may notify them to take custody of the children, but they aren't the first notification. But her parents were notified by phone. So I'm a little confused by all the notifications, but as I said before, They threw out the rule book, and we're going to do this all different.
Did Mr. Simpson ask you how she was killed?
No,
Did he ask you when she was killed?
no,
Did he ask you if you had any idea who had done it?
no,
Did he ask you where it had occurred?
no,
Did he ask you anything about the circumstances of how his ex-wife had been killed?
no.
Detective Phillips, is it your statement that he was upset at that point, was he not?
Yes, he was.
As you expected. And then he went on to say, oh my God, Nicole is dead, oh my God, and he continued repeating himself in an upset fashion. Isn't that correct?
Yes, he did.
And at some point, didn't you try to get him to get hold of himself from the emotional standpoint?
Yes, I did.
And he kept repeating himself. She's been killed. What do you mean she's been killed? Oh my God, Nicole is dead. And he repeated himself over and over again.
That's correct.
He seemed to be very upset, right?
Yes.
And you never asked him to come back to Los Angeles. He volunteered to come back on his own. Isn't that correct?
Told me he was coming back on his own, yes.
He came right back. He cooperated with the authorities, tried to give them all the information he had, did everything they wanted, cooperated with them.
Let me see if I understand this. All four detectives, all homicide detectives, leave the bodies out there. The coroner's not been notified. You all go over to another location to give notification to a man. You don't know whether he's home or not. Is that what you're saying to us?
Well, the four of us went up there to do that, and two of us were going to stay, and two of them should come right back.
See, but you all went. The question is, you all went over there.
Yes, we did.
And at that point, no one had called the coroner regarding these bodies. Is that correct?
That's correct.
No one had called a criminalist to come out and start collecting evidence. Is that correct?
I don't know that.
Well, as far as you know.
As far as I know, no criminalist was called.
You know he wasn't there, though, don't you?
He was not there.
And even when you came back, he wasn't there, was he?
When I came back, I walked up and talked to the lieutenant. I did not go back over to Bundy, so I don't know if he was there.
Was Furman with you at that point?
Didn't see him at that point.
You know where he was at that point?
No, I don't.
So once he climbed over the wall, you got in, you were separated from Mark Furman, is that
No,
correct?
the only time we were separated from Mark Furman is when we stopped and talked to Cato Kalin because he did not walk down with me to Arnell's room.
What Johnny Cochran is doing here is so crucial to the defense. You know who they're zeroing in on? It's Furman. Furman is the bad guy. Furman is the target of the defense. So you've got to get Furman away from the rest of the officers. He's got to have time.
This is exactly what they did in the Sheldon Jeter Jr. case with Pugh. They had 4 to 6 people go and give a death notice at Sheldon Jeter Jr.'s house that Tyreek Pugh didn't even live at anymore. Okay? This is the same type of situation. And when they knock on the door at Sheldon's residence, yeah, no, Pugh doesn't live here, you know. Oh, okay. You know, see you later. Sorry, but we had this as his address. Do you have an address for him? Do you know who he is? Well, yeah, we know who he is. You know what I mean?
Time to be somewhere where no one knows where he is. So maybe he's planting evidence. Maybe he's framing O.J. Simpson. This is so crucial to the defense.
What happened next?
I was approached by Mark Furman. He took me around to a walkway on the south side of the residence. We walked back there for a considerable distance, and he stopped and he pointed out an object to me. That's the item that Detective Furman had pointed out to me. It looked like it was also the same type of glove that we had seen at the Bundy location.
Detective Ron Phillips was my boss and a friend, but I find that he wasn't really loyal to what really went down. He was more loyal to his self-interest, how it affected him. As you know, he won't be interviewed. Well, there's a reason. There's a lot of things he can't answer.
We have real concerns that we are being blocked access to the evidence. That's why I'm so disturbed.
have a lot of individuals in West Los Angeles Division that celebrity, VIPs, wealthy people. Sometimes their name comes across and the department does certain things to, to help them out or do certain things a little bit more than on a normal occasion. If it turned out to be Nicole Simpson, it was going to become a major news media event. It was going to possibly involve O.J. Simpson only as the fact that he was one time her husband. And it may become a bigger case than the 4 detectives I have at West LA could handle the proper way. And that possibly we will want to take this case and transfer it downtown to Robbery Homicide Division, who has many more resources than we have.
This would never happen today. I mean, think about what we're hearing here. We're protecting VIPs and celebrities because we're worried about what the media might say about these rich people who are famous instead of protecting victims of domestic violence. And in this case, 8 times, Nicole Brown is bruised and bloody. They've got pictures and nothing happens. Nothing happens. And you wonder how we end up at this trial.
Okay, guys. You got his back? You guys ready? Back. All right, so we're ready, huh? Okay. It's probably incumbent upon the press. They want to do the right thing to get the facts before they run off with something and continue to try to convict this man before he's been tried.
We are confronted with a problem where one of the prosecutors in this case has publicly announced scientific results from spots 115, 116, and 117 that these stains have been identified as Mr. Simpson's.
DNA can provide a powerful or subtle association between a person and a stain.
I think that Mr. Harmon did that for some kind of effect for the media.
You will see dozens of stains that have been analyzed in this case. So this is, there are yet other stains that continue to be analyzed.
That was false. Those tests were not done. The mistake has been admitted to the judge. But once again, O.J. gets hammered with false evidence.
To make the statement to your honor and for public consumption that this stain was a stain that is the blood of Mr. Simpson is scientifically incorrect, is totally irresponsible.
Before he stands up and starts to accuse the police or the prosecution of such serious misconduct, he ought to at least understand what he's talking about. And to willfully stand up here and make such serious allegations with absolutely no basis whatsoever, other than to obtain public spin back in the defense favor, is reckless, is irresponsible, and should be sanctioned.
It's very, very disconcerting to have a witness who views an event to be fearful of personal repercussions.
I think that is outrageous, Your Honor. As the court is aware, we are currently undergoing significant problems with witnesses who are being hounded by the press.
They were relentless. Talk about me judging the jury. I mean, everything I did was being scrutinized and judged and talked about, and people following me into the bathroom. I had to check the stalls to make sure that there wasn't anybody in there listening to conversations. I was hiding in the corner. Everything that we did was being...
I felt like that's what we did at the Sheldon trial. When any one of us would go in the bathroom, me, Delsha, or one of the family members, we would always look underneath the stalls to see who was in there, things like that. So I know what she's talking about when she's speaking about this.
Being scrutinized. I understand the need to try to get information and reaction and stories, and that was jarring.
I would hope that everyone would appreciate the importance of maintaining the sanctity of witnesses who are simply placed on lists, and the court recognizes that it would be improper to release not only the substance of any statements, but any significant proprietary details about what witnesses may or may not be saying.
As I sat there listening to Ms. Clark and Mr. Shapiro, I knew that somehow this morning I would be dragged into the abyss with the rest of the lawyers in this case, Your Honor. Well, I don't know what Mr. Douglas is suggesting here. Are you suggesting that I gave the media a copy of a report you gave me, Mr. Douglas?
Talking to the court, Mr.
Is that what he is attempting to suggest to this court?
What I heard.
It is a statement that is derogatory in nature and relates to Detective Mark Furman. So why would we release a statement like that to the press? They've been leaking stuff throughout this case. They were leaking things before I joined this case. They continue to leak things. And I'm offended that Mr. Douglas would suggest to the court that I will leak anything. Every reporter in this courtroom knows I don't leak anything.
Mr. Harmon, I have just received your letter dated today's date indicating that the Federal Bureau of Investigation will conduct the EDTA tests that they propose on Monday, February the 20th, and that you will be doing that on items 13, which are the socks. Mr. Scheck, any comment?
Yes, I think this goes somewhat to alleviating our concerns, but a few questions. Number one, with respect to item 13, the sock, we have a strong desire to examine the sock itself. My understanding is that there is a cutting from the sock, and I presume that that is what the prosecution intends to perform this test on. And so we would like to have the sock available for immediate examination. That's really critical.
Mr. Scheck just doesn't seem to get the idea that we're trying to demonstrate that the failure to show EDTA is present means that it's not there, and this is why we need the sock. We need the sock because EDTA is present in many items. And if, for example, that sock was improperly rinsed in the rinse cycle, there's EDTA in laundry detergent.
Our evidence proved that Officer Van Adder had taken the test tubes with the blood of O.J. Simpson and the victim home with him, unauthorized. You're not supposed to take these home. And that he took the sock home with him. And he laid out the sock. Now, the sock itself was black, but to illustrate what happened, I'm using a white sock. And had taken the blood from the test tube and poured it on the sock, like this. And so, if you look at the sock, you see that it has the blood splatter on this outside. It has the same blood splatter on the inside, and then the identical blood splatter, lighter of course, on the third side. So you have, and fourth side. So you have mirror images on all four sides. That couldn't happen if the sock were being worn by the killer.
It's nonsense, and Dershowitz knows that. You don't get spattered blood on a sock by pouring blood on it. That's spattered blood, there's no question. You still want to say Van Adder did it? All right, let's say that he did. He would have had to go to the coroner's office to get Nicole's blood. Somehow get into the office, break into their vault in their lab, find Nicole's blood, and somehow sneak it back to the socks, which were in the LAPD lab, and somehow spatter the socks with the blood. Then put everything back. How the hell's he gonna do that? Dershowitz ought to be ashamed of himself.
It sounds to me like, first of all, Mr. Harmon is explaining why there may be results finding EDTA in these materials ahead of time that he can then explain away if they find it.
Barry Scheck is born September 19, 1949 in Queens, New York. He receives his bachelor's from Yale University in 1971. He is the co-founder of the Innocence Project with his friend Peter Neufeld, where they often exonerate those wrongly convicted through DNA evidence. Scheck becomes a breakout star of the Dream Team because of his knowledge of DNA.
Barry and Peter have been friends forever. I think they've been friends since college. Their families are friends. They had a law practice together. I think they still do. So they came as a team. I mean, they came together. They were always together. They were always in the conference room together. Barry, of course, was a star of the trial.
Barry Scheck and Peter Neufeld, who are friends of mine, they're bright, they're very able lawyers.
I think Barry Scheck is a brilliant lawyer. I'm honored to still consider him a good friend.
We have not been allowed to touch this evidence, to look at it for 8 months.
I know you've seen a series of letters I've written. We've been dying to find out what the defense did with the samples they obtained back in October.
Afternoon, Your Honor. The Bundy glove, which to our knowledge they haven't examined at all, if we were to take that and take a cutting from it from an area where there might be a dog bite, for instance, and do some testing on it, then when they introduced the glove, they could tell the jury that the reason there's a piece cut out of here is because it was given to the defense. And that's it. That we're not required to give them that piece back. We're not required to tell them what we did to it.
Well, you're required to give the piece back if it's still available. If it hasn't been consumed in the testing, that evidence doesn't disappear into a dark hole. I realize some of it's going to be consumed or destroyed in some way through the testing process.
I don't think they understood how devastating it would be if the jurors believed that a piece of evidence had been tampered with. If they thought that, they never would have introduced the sock. They would have focused on the glove. They would have focused on the blood that was found. They had a pretty strong case without the sock. The sock didn't strengthen their case. It mortally weakened the case.
They've made these allegations about the police department. There is no reason why they didn't do this before, and there's no reason why they should be entitled to do this now after those allegations, Your Honor. That's like the fox guarding the hen house, pardon me. That makes no sense. They're going to have these guys hunched over these little swatches, breathing all over them, doing all these things that he's going to criticize.
Funny how these arguments are the same depending on which side I'm hearing.
Our experts do not have an opportunity to look at this evidence and examine it for trace evidence. And I would point out that both sides are correct in this regard. I'm only pointing out that the prejudice continues. We have real concerns that we are being blocked access to the evidence. That's why I'm so disturbed that a compromise could be rejected.
Yeah, Barry. They win! They win! They win!
Call Detective Tom Lang.
Here's my boy Tom Lang. Tom Lang has co-written and authored, and he's been involved heavily in all of the written work that has come after this case. Tom Lang, we get to see him here on the stand. It's actually going to be how I kick off my later show. My later show is at 5:15. It's an hour's worth of this, and then it's an hour of me breaking down some stuff. Timeline, where people lived, how long it would take to get to here, how long it would take to get to there, logistics of this crime, and how OJ, if he did do it, how did he, how was that possible? What's the window? Who is it? Not interested. Have a blessed day. So,
There's probably a need to discuss something with the court regarding this. As soon as possible, I think, Your Honor.
All right,
Before we do that, I'd like to mark the evidence and show it to the witness. I'm removing it.
Who is it?
Brown bag.
The glove that the...
Who is it?
Mr. Goldman.
What's up?
The blue knit stocking cap I observed near the glove.
Do I want my grass mowed? Oh, sure. How much you want for it?
Defense attacking the testimony of the first
Sounds
officer at the
perfect.
murder scene, continuing the onslaught by the defense.
All right, babe.
questioning the professionalism and motives of virtually every law enforcement officer investigating the case. Next up, Detective Tom Lang is in the hot seat as
From the brown bag.
The glove at the foot of Mr. Goldman. The blue knit stocking cap I observed near the glove.
Week 4 concludes with the defense attacking the testimony of the first officers at the murder scene, continuing the onslaught by the defense, questioning the professionalism and motives of virtually every law enforcement officer investigating the case. Next up, Detective Tom Lang is in the hot seat as OJ 25 continues. I'm Roger Cossack.
All right. So yes, we will be back at this at 5:15. I mean, I guess people just want to mow my lawn. I'm going to go hit on my sixth girlfriend. She gets me every other Sunday for a couple hours. So neighbors ruining everything. I know what. I don't understand. Could you guys hear it though? It's your neighbor. You want your grass mowed? Shit. Oh my God. How much? $30. All right, sounds good. I'm gonna yell at Frank. Frank's supposed to be my grass mower. It's this new neighbor of mine. I don't know if he's trying to get fresh, but I'm not interested. That neighbor just made all of our hearts skip a beat. I know. It is always when I'm live with you guys. It feels so bad. Okay. But yeah, tonight at 5:15. So go, do what you do on your lovely Sundays. But I'm going to go enjoy my lunch, and then I will be back here. Yeah, I did. I said he could cut my grass for $30. Go ahead. So he's going to mow my lawn. I really would like to stick one of these YouTubers on him and, hey, you want to see some nudes? How about you can, cut my grass? They can send you the nudes. It would be a great thing. So... but yes, I'll be back at 5:15 Eastern to do, like I said, an episode that's going to be about 45 minutes in length of time to see some of this stuff. But then we're going to break down some stuff. So go ahead and enjoy some of your Sunday here. And for those people that are not living in the United States of America, my Sundays usually revolve around your time frame. Usually I do that on Sundays and Wednesdays to help out my UK support. People that support me in the UK, I want to support you in time frames that work best for you. So Sundays and Wednesdays, when I do stuff with AD, I go on at 5:15 on Tuesdays, so take advantage of that as well. But yeah, please thumbs up this the video, share it, or if you can, if you can't, spread the word. But I'm breaking all of this down for Sheldon Jeter Jr. and Rachel Del Tondo because it correlates so much with what I'm doing. And I got great news this week. I got some groundbreaking news, and I'll be updating you guys as it pertains to Aliquippa. So I'll see you guys later. Be safe, and come with the popcorn because I'm going to blow your minds at 5:15. All right, love y'all. Thank you again, mods. You guys are the best. And catch you soon.